Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is Kate Subata with cleanslatepeople.com. And today I have with me someone whose work I've respected for a very long time, Greg Smith. He is also of Hyattsville, and he has been working for a number of years, observing, monitoring, and looking into the activities of elected officials, especially as regards the environment and also how citizens' input is being treated or not treated. He was very involved with the gerrymandering situation, which took place a few months ago in Prince George's County, which is how we came to know each other. And Greg has just learned something very important regarding the current primary race, which, as you know, we have a few more days before the final voting. And I felt it was so important. I really wanted him to speak about it today. And so I'm going to hand the mic over to Greg, and I really ask you to pay sharp attention to what it is he has to share.
Thanks, Kate. Greg Smith here. As Kate said, I live in Hyattsville, and most of my work actually has been on environmental issues, fighting bad projects or policies or proposed laws. And then where we have some breathing room trying to push something positive. And in the course of doing that kind of work, you see how the procedural laws, the right to know laws and the right to have a fair say laws get trammeled in these processes. You see how corporate special interests with big money are influencing our decision-making processes around elections and around legislation and around policies and programs and projects and priorities. And with a little, well, it can take a lot of digging, but sometimes with a little bit of digging, you can shed some light. And as Justice Brandeis said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And so in the course of my work and working with other folks who work on good government, we press for transparency. We press for amending the Maryland Public Information Act to make citizen access, or the public's access, you shouldn't have to be a citizen to have access to public records, right? Better to improve that. And this past year, so more recently, since 2018, I've been part of a group called Sustainable Hyattsville, fighting in particular development in Hyattsville, an egregious development. Our local council member, Denny Tavares, has pushed this project beyond reason. It has no public interest value at all. So I've learned through painful experience how the county zoning and land use process works as well. So more recently, last spring, in the spring of 2021, I was part of an alliance of grassroots groups, civic, environmental, good government, and justice groups who waged an intensive campaign, grassroots campaign in Annapolis, fighting House Bill 980. Which was being pushed by the county council, the county planning board, and the county executive. And that bill would have exempted the entire countywide map amendment process from the Maryland State Public Ethics Law. The essential protections against developers being able to drop major contributions on our county council members and expect them to vote for their projects or their legislation. It would have exempted the entire process in which the county council was going to rezone every property in the county. And we caught wind of this. We looked at it, and under that bill, there would have been nothing that would stop the developer from dropping a $6,000 check on a district council member, a county council member, file an application to have the zoning intensified on their property so they could get more profits, and expect that county council member to be able to vote in favor of that application. And the bill would have allowed a developer to file a zoning application up to 15 days after the public hearing on the countywide map amendment. And we had 24 groups signing letters, testifying in front of the House and Senate committees, and legislators from Prince George's County, some of them, and from other counties were appalled at what our county government was trying to do. They said this would never fly in our counties. And these were people who had served on the equivalent of their county councils back home before becoming state legislators. They were appalled. And in my opinion, our county council members and county representatives were attempting to mislead the public and the General Assembly about the intent and the impact of that bill. And what we saw was basically the planning department was saying, if you want to intensify the zoning on your property, fill out this form and send it in. And at the same time, they're all saying, well, this is not an exercise where a developer is supposed to intensify their zone. We said, well, if that's the case, why instruct them to fill out this form if they want to intensify the zone? Anyway, in the end, thanks to Senator Pinsky, who is a good government champion and an environmental champion, we managed to detoxify that bill a bit. But what we did saw was developers filed well over 100 applications to significantly intensify the zoning on their land. So then that flowed right from that into this redistricting farce that happened, where Derek Davis put in a bill at the last minute to surgically gerrymander our voting districts to exclude certain progressive candidates who are likely to challenge the developer's agenda. And then Mel Franklin joined in, put in the amendment. So it became the Davis-Franklin amendment. And Calvin Hawkins was pushing this as well. So the thing that got the conversation you and I have going more recently is I received a pretty odd mailer from a group calling itself Jobs First PAC. I thought, well, I guess the other candidates think jobs should come second. I don't know. And then I said, well, who is Jobs First PAC? And then we got a second mailing. Each of these mailings endorsed a constellation of candidates. They varied a little bit from mailer to mailer, but there were two common denominators. Well, more than two, but the primary two denominators was they both endorsed Calvin Hawkins and Mel Franklin, and they were both completely devoid of any substance. And then you can see a disclaimer there at the bottom of it in finer print saying that the candidates endorsed hadn't gotten the approval of the candidates they endorsed, which is kind of interesting because what they did was they sent out district specific mailers. They had a certain set to District 1, all the way through District 9. I'm in District 2. Tom Dranoga, who has often clashed with the developers and with Hawkins and Franklin on all kinds of policies, including zoning and land use and environmental issues, and who's an environmental champion, period, and a good government champion, period. They endorsed him. And this was 4 years after they had spent money attacking him, accusing him of being a developer shill. It was just absurd. So then I started to do a little research. And what I found was that if you have the time and the resources and you have a little bit of know-how from having learned, or you ask the right people who know the right questions, you can start finding certain kinds of data. And these are publicly available databases that a lot of people don't know about, don't know how to use. But I think the State Board of Elections does a really good job. There's some glitches in their system, but they've done a really good job of trying to start to provide transparency. So I looked up Jobs First PAC. And what I saw was, as of June 23rd, they had raised $75,000, all of which came from 3 developers, Edward St. John, William Chesley, and a constellation of his LLCs, limited liability corporations, and Kenneth Michaels, who also gives through LLCs. Giving through LLCs is a great way to to hide to some extent who's behind the project. And what you see in Prince George's County and other jurisdictions is a major developer or corporation will set up property-specific LLCs. And then to figure out who's behind the zoning application or whatever land use application it is, you have to go then to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation database, and you can find some information there, and then you have to do some more digging. So I looked at these LLCs and these LLPs, and they all tracked back to Michaels and Chesley. And then Edward St. John, I think, just gave a personal check. So 3 developers, each giving roughly $25,000, I think. And then they set this up, I think, on June 21st or so. And then I looked at the Slate account, and the treasurer and the chair live in Harford County, and they vote in Harford County, and they're associated with a firm called Rice Consulting LLC. They're a hired gun political consulting firm, just like a lot of hired gun political consulting firms. And I thought, wow, it's really touching that these people who live and vote in Harford County care so much about the poor, ignorant people in Prince George's County that they feel like they need to inform us through these substance-free mailers where they're endorsing two of the most developer-friendly candidates on our county council. So, that was the first thing. And then I looked at their later report, and they raised another, saying they raised it. They didn't go out there and dig ditches or have a bake sale. They wrote checks to deliver the message they wanted to deliver, to elect the people they wanted to deliver, to get the outcomes they want to get, right? They raised another $15,000. So as of June 23rd, they had spent about, I think, $56,000. Since then, they spent about like 10 or so. Anyway, they still get, as of July 3rd, July 5th, they had still had a bunch of money that they hadn't spent, or apparently hadn't spent. So we might expect additional mailers coming out maybe today, tomorrow or Monday or Tuesday. So that's the main thing. Like, Jobs First PAC is basically a front for 3 developers. There was another $5,000 check from an entity doing business as Jerry's Seafood. But 85,000 of the 90 came from these 3 developers.
So just to summarize what you've just said, what we're looking at is developers who have a long record of requesting favorable decisions from the county council, and specifically from the various people who engineered the gerrymander or the gerrymander attempt, now seeking to influence voters with a false flag of, suggesting various candidates, but the 2 candidates that are in common in every single mailer across the county are the 2 at-large council persons who have proven themselves to be highly amenable to emoluments from developers to look the other way on bad development. Am I right?
I'm not going to get into the emoluments clause of the Constitution or use that word, but there's something that smells bad here. That's one thing. And the other thing is, this isn't the only case. I'm sure this isn't the only case. I've done this long enough to know that this is just one of many examples we could dig up. I did look at, Edward St. John's Properties has at least two applications pending right now for land use decisions that have to, for which the county council, the district council is the final authority. The district council is our county council wearing its land use and zoning hat. These are called detailed site plans. Unfortunately, in our public ethics law, this is a really weird carve out, but detailed site plans are exempt from the public ethics law. They're not covered by it. So a developer can write a $6,000 check through each of multiple LLCs to a county council member, and that county council member can vote in favor of that project. The other thing that's really that I think is people should know about is this same gang pushed through the massive rewrite of our zoning ordinance several years ago. And they did it over the objections of civic environmental groups who said, nobody knows what's in this bill. It's a huge bill, and you just got several hundred proposed amendments in the last few weeks. We were asking the council president, Danielle Glaros, who considered that bill to be her baby, to hold off and give everybody a chance to understand what was in it, because it had our zoning, the land use determines what happens through it in so many ways. It affects our quality of life, it affects traffic, it affects loading on our schools, environmental quality, public health, climate change. It affects all of those. It affects our pocketbooks in terms of our taxes, but they pushed it through. And one of the most egregious changes they made was they got rid of something called a conceptual site plan. And in the project we've been fighting, the developer had to file a conceptual site plan, a preliminary plan of subdivision, and a detailed site plan. The district council has final say on CSPs and DSPs. Conceptual site plans are subject to the public ethics law. So that's one reason it's a disservice to the public. And it turns out they completely got rid of conceptual site plans. So that's bad, first of all, because it's one of the very few decisions that the district council makes that is subject to the public ethics law. And it's a really critical first early look where communities and the planning board and the planning staff can understand the potential impacts of a project and comment on them. And not just comment on them, but comment on them that creates an official record on which an appeal or challenge is based. They have completely wiped out that opportunity for the public. And that is egregious. And in my work, I've worked to defend the National Environmental Policy Act and other laws, because one of the most essential things about the National Environmental Policy Act and counterpart laws is that right for citizens or people who could be affected by, harmed by a decision, to have an informed say, to try to get a better decision out of their agencies. And if they get a bad decision out of the agencies, to have a record on which to challenge the agency's bad decision. And our county council voted to wipe out that critical opportunity for counties across the state. Now, for communities across the county. And I can tell you how important it is. We just got the Court of Special Appeals in February of this year, just reversed, after 3 years of litigation for us, just reversed the district council's first approval of this project, just reversed their conceptual site plan approval. And one of the partner groups that we worked with in fighting House Bill 980 and the redistricting and calling for a fair process in the zoning map amendment, countywide map amendment, concerned citizens of District 4 just won a major battle in court. I think it was a Court of Special Appeals, reversing the county council's approval of what's called a zoning text amendment. And the developers and county council members use zoning text amendments to basically rewrite the definition of a zone in a way that most people aren't even aware of. They often don't identify, the district council often does, or county council often doesn't identify the affected properties. They almost never assess the environmental or transportation or community impacts of these laws that rewrite our zoning code on the fly. But concerned citizens, after basically a 3-year battle in the courts, overturned Council Bill 17, 2019. It shouldn't take that. And they know, the developers and the council members know, that very few groups have the wherewithal, whether it's money or knowledge or stamina, whatever it is, have the means to challenge their bad decisions. And that isn't the way it should work. And and so when we see the combination of these bad decisions being made, policies and projects, and developers giving huge amounts of money, either often through LLCs and slates and PACs, they're not giving them to the candidates because there's a bit of a bar in the public ethics law, but they certainly are using that money to promote certain candidates, as we're seeing in Jobs First PAC. I won't say that's the same with this other slate that I looked at that I told you about, but yeah, it's certainly what's going on.
Well, just a couple of notes. In contrast to that, if a regular homeowner goes before the council sitting as the zoning board to make a slight change on their property, put up a shed, install a patio, put a roof over their side porch, something like that, they have to create a detailed site plan. They have to go through all kinds of effort. They have to show why there's an erosion issue or an issue having to do with handicap access or all of this kind of thing. In other words, what you're describing is a sort of open gate for developers that the regular citizen is not getting.
But in our case, our case is not unique. It might be unusual, but in our case, the district council, even when it got to the detailed site plan phase, they ignored not only the law, the zoning ordinance, they ignored their own, the conditions that they had written into the conceptual site plan.
Oh my gosh.
One of those conditions was that the developer had at the DSP stage, the developer had to show proof that they had all the required floodplain approvals. We kept saying it's insane to build in the floodplain. It's insane. It was insane before. It's especially insane given what global warming is bringing to us day after day. But the county council ignored it. And the way this process works, and it's one of the best known secrets out there if you engage this process, is even though the district council is supposed to convene as a quote quasi judicial body, if the local council member wants the project, they almost all vote for the project almost every time.
Yes.
No questions.
Yes.
And our council member, Denny Tavares, has shown complete contempt for our community. She's ignored the city of Hyattsville's policy-based opposition to this project. She has shown a tremendous either ignorance of or disregard for the facts and the law. I'll say that's my opinion. But when we have written into our appeal to the council the essential points of the law that apply and done the density calculations for the county council, the district council, and she says, oh, this is all highly mathematical. Can I get some advice here? And the deputy general counsel for the planning board gives a multi-minute explanation based on the wrong section of the zoning ordinance that applies to commercial and industrial developments. And we're talking about a residential development, and then says, there, does that help? And Councilmember Tavares says, oh yes, thank you very much. And then after a long pause, Councilmember Denoga points out that the deputy general counsel had quoted from the wrong section of the code, and there's no correction made. They do all this during a time where we cannot respond. That's really troubling. And in fact, the developer did not have the floodplain approvals. We nailed them in May of last year when we went to the Maryland Department of Environment and said, these guys are operating on the site, as far as we can tell, without a stormwater permit and without a floodplain and wetland permit. And MDE confirmed that. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't want to get into the specifics of any council member's ability to do math. I suspect that council member Tavares could easily do that math. In our very simple appeal to the council, we laid out the points in the zoning ordinance point by point. And we did the math on the calculation. Look, if you apply the law properly, here's what you get. Here's the density you get. It radically exceeds the density allowed by the zoning ordinance, or even that the council had approved illegally in the conceptual site plan, and anything in the surrounding R55 community. It just radically exceeds that, so it's in violation of the law. I mean, and then we, in our oral testimony, oral arguments, we did the exact same thing. Here are the, we're lay people. Here are the points of the law. It's not. You don't need a law degree to understand this language, and you don't need a degree in higher mathematics to do these calculations. In the end, we were basically dividing a 2-digit number by a 1-digit number to come up with a density. And they either wanted to follow the law or they didn't. They didn't want to follow the law. We've been trying since the summer of 2020, and actually before that, but more formally since the summer of 2020, to get public records related to the planning department's conversation around density for this project and how it should be calculated, because we understood from the get-go that their approach was illegal and dishonest. We've gotten a single record, one record from them in all that time, and that record showed the developer suggesting the senior planning staff, look, here's how to make the density look like it's less than 9. And they allowed the planning board's attorney and their planning staff to speak to them, but not us. And this was to deal with the remanded court case, but we had no opportunity to comment. We filed a request with DPI, Department of Permitting, Inspection, and Enforcement, around a violation on this site in August and September of 2020. We still have not received a single record.
Anyway, we'll circle back on this, but thank you especially for this information. And I want to underline to voters again, look at the materials that are coming to you. in the mail, these direct mailers, see who's behind it, and then look up who are the people who are funding it. Because just saying that they're for jobs first, or saying that they're for democracy or something like that, does not mean that's what their real agenda is.
I know this is a labor of love for you. And thanks for helping to get this information out to the public. I hope a lot of people see it.